Part 1. The Shadow of the Shogunate. The whispers started before I could even walk. Whispers of duty, of loyalty, of the shadow that cloaked the shogun's palace. They spoke of the Kunoichi, the women who moved like phantoms, their very existence a carefully guarded secret. I was born into this world, a world of hidden blades and unspoken truths, a world where the line between reality and illusion blurred with every passing moon. My earliest memories are fragments, glimpses of stern faces, demanding training, and the constant pressure to be unseen, unheard, a ghost in the elaborate tapestry of the shogun's court. The air was thick with incense and secrets. Every rustle of silk, every creak of the floorboards, a potential threat, a potential revelation. We were taught to observe, to analyze, to become one with the shadows, our movements as fluid and silent as the smoke curling from the incense burners. They said we were the eyes and ears of the shogun, the invisible protectors of his reign. But even in those early years, a seed of doubt began to sprout within me. What was the true nature of this protection? Were we safeguarding the realm, or were we merely pawns in a larger game of power, manipulated by forces beyond our comprehension? My training was relentless. From dawn till dusk we honed our skills, our bodies becoming weapons, our minds sharpened to a razor's edge. We learned the art of disguise, transforming ourselves from inconspicuous servants to elegant courtesans in the blink of an eye. We mastered the delicate dance of diplomacy, our words carefully chosen, each syllable a veiled threat or a subtle promise. And beneath the layers of silk and smiles, we concealed the deadliest of weapons, our knowledge of poisons, our mastery of hand-to-hand combat, our ability to vanish without a trace. The palace itself was a labyrinth, a sprawling complex of hidden passages, secret gardens and whispering corridors. It was a place of beauty and intrigue, where every smile concealed a potential dagger, and every whispered word held the weight of 1,000 secrets. We moved through this labyrinth like wraiths, our footsteps silent, our presence unnoticed. We were the shadows, the whispers, the unseen guardians of the shogunate. I remember the endless hours spent practicing the art of invisibility, blending seamlessly into the background, becoming one with the tapestries and the shadows. We were taught to control our breathing, to slow our heartbeats, to erase ourselves from the perception of others. It was a demanding discipline, requiring unwavering focus and an almost superhuman control over our bodies and minds. But it was essential to our survival. The other girls, my fellow Kunoichi, were a strange mix of personalities. Some embraced their roles with fierce determination, their eyes burning with unwavering loyalty to the shogun. Others, like me, carried a deep sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that we were being used for purposes beyond our understanding. We rarely spoke of our doubts, our fears. The walls had ears, and even in the privacy of our own chambers, we felt the weight of unseen eyes upon us. Trust was a luxury we could not afford. Every relationship was a potential trap, every conversation a potential betrayal. We lived in a world of secrets, and the burden of those secrets weighed heavily upon us. The years blurred into one another, a relentless cycle of training, missions, and whispered reports. We were given glimpses into the intricate workings of the shogun's court, the delicate balance of power between rival clans, the subtle machinations of ambitious lords. We witnessed betrayals, assassinations, and conspiracies that would have shaken the very foundations of the realm had they ever come to light. But we remained silent, our lips sealed by oaths of loyalty and the ever-present threat of retribution. I often wondered what lay beyond the walls of the palace, beyond the confines of our carefully constructed world. I dreamt of a life free from shadows, a life where I could choose my own path, where my voice could be heard without fear of reprisal. But those dreams were fleeting, quickly extinguished by the harsh realities of my existence. I was a Kunoichi, a spy in the shogun's palace, and my destiny was inextricably linked to the shadows. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace. Part 2 of 25. The whispering continued. It slithered through the paper walls, a constant rustle like dry leaves skittering across cobblestones. I tried to pinpoint its source, pressing my ear against the thin wood, sliding shoji screens open with agonizing slowness. but it always seemed to shift, to emanate from somewhere just beyond my reach. It never formed words, never coalesced into anything concrete, just that unsettling susurrus, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone, even in the deepest hours of the night. My mission, given to me by the secretive Crane clan, was simple: infiltrate the Shogun's court, gather intelligence, and await further instruction. Simple, yet fraught with peril. The Shogun, a man shrouded in rumor and fear, was said to be paranoid, surrounded by spies of his own. Every servant, every geisha, every gardener could be an enemy. And now, this whispering. It frayed my nerves, tightening them like a bowstring pulled taut. During the day, I played my role as Lady Hana, a demure noblewoman sent to the palace as a companion, a polite euphemism I knew. The Shogun was known for his eccentricities. I attended tea ceremonies, practiced calligraphy, and endured the veiled scrutiny of the other women in the court. Each smile felt like a bared fang, every polite inquiry a thinly veiled interrogation. I learned to smile back, my own mask firmly in place, my true purpose hidden behind layers of silk and deference. But it was the nights that truly tested me. The whispering intensified after dark, weaving its way into my dreams, turning them into a disjointed tapestry of shadows and half-formed faces. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the whispering still echoing in my ears, convinced that someone, something, was watching me from the darkness. One night, I decided I'd had enough. Armed with a small tanto, hidden beneath the folds of my sleeping kimono, I resolved to find the source of the whispers. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the tatami mats. The air was thick with the scent of incense, usually calming, but tonight it felt suffocating, cloying. I crept through the silent corridors, my bare feet making no sound on the polished wood. The whispering was louder now, seemingly coming from the end of the hallway. I followed it, my heart pounding against my ribs, the tanto cold against my skin. The hallway ended in a closed door, unlike any I'd seen in the palace before. It was made of dark, unpolished wood, and adorned with strange, intricate carvings that seemed to writhe in the moonlight. No light seeped from beneath it, and an unnatural chill emanated from the wood itself. Hesitantly, I reached for the handle. It was cold, almost icy, and as my fingers brushed against it, the whispering intensified, morphing into a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. I recoiled, pulling my hand back as if burned. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever lay beyond that door was not human. Fear warred with curiosity. My mission, the Crane clan, the Shogun, all of it seemed insignificant compared to the primal terror that gripped me. But I was a Kunoichi, trained from birth to face danger, to overcome fear. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and reached for the handle again. This time, I turned it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light. The growling stopped, replaced by a silence even more unsettling than the whispering had been. I peered into the darkness, trying to make out something, anything. But it was as if the room itself was void of any substance. Then, a single, blood-red eye opened in the darkness, watching me. It pulsed with an unnatural light and seemed to bore into my very soul. A low, guttural chuckle echoed from the darkness, sending shivers down my spine. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut, and fleeing back to my room. The image of the eye burned into my mind. I knew then that my mission was no longer about the Shogun. It was about survival. Whatever lurked beyond that door was ancient, powerful, and malevolent, and it knew I was there. The whispering returned, but it was different now. It was closer, more insistent, laced with a chilling amusement. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a promise. The next morning, I found a single, blood-red camellia blossom on my pillow. Its petals were impossibly smooth, almost velvety, and they seemed to pulse with the same unnatural light as the eye I had seen in the darkness. The whispering continued, a constant reminder of the horror that awaited me behind the closed door. And I knew, with growing dread, that I would have to face it. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace, Part 3. The whispers started softly, like the rustle of silk against skin. At first I dismissed them as the wind playing tricks in the palace's elaborate eaves, or the scurrying of rats in the walls. But they persisted, growing bolder, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the very stones of the castle, slithering into my dreams, coating my waking moments with a film of unease. "Kasumi," they hissed, my name a phantom breath on the air. My days were spent maintaining the facade of a demure lady-in-waiting, attending to Lady Hana, the shogun's favorite concubine. She remained oblivious to the creeping dread that clung to me like a second skin. She was consumed by her own anxieties, whispering of a growing coldness in the shogun's gaze, a distance that chilled her to the bone. I feigned sympathy, all the while my senses straining for the source of the whispers. They seemed to intensify in the West Wing, a section of the palace typically reserved for guests and the shogun's private chambers. The West Wing was also where the abandoned gardens lay, a place shrouded in an unnerving stillness, choked by overgrown wisteria and shadowed by ancient, gnarled cherry trees. One stifling afternoon, as I arranged a bouquet of lilies for Lady Hana, a single perfect white petal detached itself and drifted towards the West Wing's closed doors. It moved with unnatural purpose, drawn by an unseen force. A shiver crawled up my spine. I knew I had to investigate. Under the cover of darkness, I slipped out of my quarters. The palace corridors, usually bustling with activity, were eerily deserted. The only sound was the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of my geta against the polished wooden floors. The air grew heavy as I approached the West Wing, thick with a cloying sweetness that prickled my nostrils. The garden doors creaked open, revealing a scene bathed in the ghostly light of the full moon. The wisteria, heavy with blooms, hung like spectral curtains. The cherry trees cast long, skeletal shadows that danced across the neglected pathways. The whispers were louder here, a cacophony of voices just beyond the veil of perception. "Kasumi, join us. Become one with the shadows." I moved deeper into the garden, my hand instinctively reaching for the tanto concealed beneath my kimono. The sweet scent grew stronger, sickeningly so. I recognized it now. The aroma of nightshade, a potent and dangerous herb. But it wasn't the flowers themselves that exuded this overwhelming fragrance. At the heart of the garden, nestled amongst the twisted roots of the oldest cherry tree, was a small stone shrine. Before it, a figure knelt, draped in a dark robe. As I approached, the figure rose, turning slowly to face me. It was Lady Chiyo, the shogun's former favorite, who had mysteriously disappeared months ago. But she was different. Her skin was pale and translucent, almost glowing in the moonlight. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, were now vacant, black pools reflecting the moon's cold light. "Kasumi," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo of its former self. "You have heard the whispers. They call to you as they call to me." I remained silent, my hand tightening on the hilt of my tanto. "The shadows offer power, Kasumi," Lady Chiyo continued, taking a step closer. "A power beyond your comprehension. Join us. Embrace the shadows. Become one with the whispers." She extended a hand towards me, her long, pale fingers twitching. The sweet, suffocating scent of nightshade emanated from her, filling my lungs, making my head spin. I stumbled back, my senses reeling. "What have they done to you?" I choked out. A flicker of something that resembled sadness crossed Lady Chiyo's face. "They have shown me the truth," she whispered. "The truth that lies beneath the surface, beneath the lies and the deceit, the truth that the shogun hides." "What truth?" I demanded, struggling against the growing disorientation. Lady Chiyo smiled, a chilling, empty smile that sent shivers down my spine. "The truth of what lies beneath this palace, Kasumi. The truth of what the shogun truly worships." She pointed a long, skeletal finger towards the base of the cherry tree. "Look." Hesitantly, I followed her gaze. Beneath the tangled roots, partially obscured by the shadows, was a small, dark opening. A cold draught emanated from it, carrying the same cloying sweetness of nightshade, along with something else, something ancient and foul. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex, pulling me towards the opening. "Kasumi, come! The shadows await." I knew I should run, escape the garden, alert the guards, but a strange, morbid curiosity held me captive. I had to know. I had to see what lay hidden beneath the shogun's palace, What dark secret he guarded so fiercely? Taking a shaky breath, I stepped towards the darkness. The whispers welcomed me, promising power, knowledge, truth. But beneath the seductive promises, I heard something else, a chilling, guttural growl that resonated deep within the earth, a sound that promised not power, but oblivion. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's Palace Part 4. The scent of jasmine and decay hung heavy in the air, a cloying sweetness masking something far more sinister. The Shogun's gardens, once a vibrant tapestry of color, now felt like a suffocating web, each meticulously pruned bonsai tree a silent, watchful sentinel. My hand instinctively went to the kunai hidden in my sleeve. The oppressive silence after the encounter with Lord Ashikaga continued to ring in my ears, a stark contrast to the usual courtly bustle. The whispers had intensified. Servants scuttled away when I approached, their eyes wide with an unspoken fear. Even Lady Chio, my contact, had become elusive, leaving cryptic messages tucked into folds of silk, hinting at dangers lurking beneath the gilded surface of the palace. The serpent sheds its skin. One message read, its delicate calligraphy, a chilling contrast to its meaning. I knew the serpent was the code name for a faction within the court, vying for power in the shadows. But who was shedding their skin? And what new monstrosity would emerge? Sleep offered no respite. Nightmares plagued me, distorted visions of Lord Ashikaga's face, his eyes gleaming with unnatural light, his voice a rasping whisper promising power, if I only swore fealty to something. Something dark and nameless that coiled in the depths of the palace, its presence a suffocating weight on my chest. Days bled into one another, each one marked by a growing sense of unease. I continued my duties, attending tea ceremonies where the smiles felt strained, listening to polite conversations that held veiled threats, all the while searching for answers. I spent hours in the palace library, poring over ancient scrolls and dusty tomes, seeking any mention of the serpent or the strange occurrences plaguing the shogun's court. One evening, while exploring the library's restricted section, a place I shouldn't have been, I stumbled upon a hidden alcove concealed behind a revolving bookshelf. Inside, I found a collection of leather-bound journals, their pages yellowed and brittle with age. They chronicled the history of the palace, revealing secrets that had been buried for centuries. My blood ran cold as I read about the shadow sickness, a mysterious affliction that had gripped the court generations ago. Its symptoms were eerily similar to what I had observed: paranoia, insomnia, vivid nightmares, and ultimately, a descent into madness. The journals hinted at a dark ritual, a pact made with an entity residing beneath the palace, granting power in exchange for, well, the journals didn't explicitly state what was exchanged, but the implication was terrifying. The final entry, written in a shaky hand, ended abruptly mid-sentence. The serpent demands the serpent. I slammed the journal shut, my heart pounding against my ribs. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was a horrifying mosaic of whispers, shadows, and ancient evils. The serpent wasn't just a political faction. It was something far older, something that had infected the very foundations of the palace. As I crept back to my chambers, the palace felt different. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more profound, as if the very walls were holding their breath. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, a certainty that I was being watched. Suddenly, a low hiss echoed from the end of the corridor. I froze, every muscle tense, my hand gripping the kunai. The hiss came again, closer this time, accompanied by a slithering sound. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly turned, my eyes straining to pierce the darkness. A pair of glowing red eyes emerged from the gloom, followed by a scaled body that shimmered in the dim light. It was a serpent, larger than any I had ever seen, its scales a mosaic of obsidian and jade, its forked tongue flicked in and out, tasting the air. Terror clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to remain calm. I knew this was no ordinary snake. It was a messenger, a harbinger of the darkness that lurked beneath the palace. The serpent slithered closer, its eyes fixed on mine. It stopped a few feet away, its head raised, as if awaiting a response. Then, in a voice that echoed in my mind, not my ears, it spoke. "The serpent summons you," it hissed, its voice laced with an ancient power that made my bones ache. "The shogun awaits." The serpent turned and glided down the corridor, disappearing into the shadows. I was left standing alone, the serpent's words echoing in my mind, a chilling invitation to a fate I couldn't comprehend. I knew I should flee, escape the palace before it was too late, but something held me back. A morbid curiosity, a desperate need to understand the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. With a deep breath, I followed the serpent into the darkness, knowing that I was walking into the heart of the serpent's lair, a place where shadows whispered and ancient evils stirred, and I knew with a sickening certainty that I might never return. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 5. The whispers continued, a chilling counterpoint to the rhythmic creak of the palace at night. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, the very timbers weeping secrets only I could hear. They spoke of shadows that stretched too long, of smiles that never reached the eyes, and of a hunger that gnawed at the heart of the shogunate. I had tried to convince myself it was the strain, the constant fear of discovery. The Lady Hana remained friendly, but there was a brittle quality to her now, a fragility that belied a hidden steel. I suspected she was under similar scrutiny, trapped in the same web of unseen eyes. The jade hairpin was my only solace. I clutched it, the cool stone a stark contrast to the fevered heat of my skin. It was more than just a trinket now, a symbol of my mission, a reminder of the world beyond the gilded cage. One stifling afternoon, as cicadas thrummed in the oppressive heat, Lady Hana summoned me to the gardens. The koi pond shimmered, the water lilies unnaturally still. The air hung heavy, laden with the scent of jasmine and something else, something metallic, faintly sickening. "A gift," Lady Hana said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held out a small, lacquered box. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson silk, lay a single, exquisitely crafted katana. The blade gleamed, its polished surface reflecting my distorted image. "It belonged to my mother," she continued, her eyes fixed on the weapon. "She was skilled." The last word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I reached out, my fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the hilt. The steel was cold against my skin, yet a strange warmth seemed to emanate from within. It felt alive. "It's beautiful," I breathed, my voice hoarse. "It offers protection," Lady Hana said, her gaze finally meeting mine. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, a desperate plea masked by a carefully composed facade. That night, the whispers intensified. They no longer spoke in vague allusions, but uttered concrete words, chillingly precise. They spoke of the blood moon ritual, of a sacrifice to appease ancient gods, and of a darkness that hungered for a pure heart. I couldn't sleep. I paced my room, the katana held tight in my grip. The metal seemed to pulse in my hand, a steady, rhythmic beat, echoing the frantic thumping of my own heart. The whispers followed me, weaving themselves into the very fabric of my being. Driven by a nameless dread, I crept out into the silent corridors. The moonlight filtering through the paper screens cast long, distorted shadows, transforming familiar objects into grotesque shapes. The air was thick with a cloying sweetness, the same metallic tang I'd smelled in the gardens. I found myself drawn to the shogun's chambers. The guards stood motionless, their faces obscured by the deep shadows of their helmets. They were not asleep, they were waiting. A low chanting emanated from within. It was a guttural, rhythmic sound that resonated deep within my bones. I pressed my ear against the door, the whispers growing louder, intertwining with the chant, forming a horrifying symphony of dread. I knew I should turn back, that I was risking everything by staying. But something compelled me forward, a morbid curiosity I couldn't resist. I slipped the hairpin from my hair, its sharpened tip glinting in the moonlight. With a trembling hand, I inserted it into the lock. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a scene that would forever be etched into my memory. The room was bathed in an eerie red glow, the source of which was a large brazier burning in the center. The air shimmered with heat, the metallic scent now overwhelming. Around the brazier, figures cloaked in black chanted in unison, their faces hidden by hoods. And in the center, bound and gagged, was Lady Hana. The shogun stood before her, a ceremonial dagger raised high, His face was contorted in a mask of ecstatic fervor, his eyes gleaming with an unholy light. The chanting reached a crescendo, the whispers screaming in my ears. "The blood moon demands a pure heart!" the shogun roared, his voice echoing off the walls. He brought the dagger down. I didn't think, I acted. I lunged forward, the katana singing as it sliced through the air. The chanting ceased. The hooded figures turned, their shadowed faces revealing nothing but empty darkness. And in the center of the room, the shogun stood, frozen, the dagger inches from Lady Hana's chest. My katana was buried deep in his back. The whispers fell silent. The only sound was the soft drip, drip, drip of blood onto the polished floor. I stood there, frozen, the katana heavy in my grip. I had saved Lady Hana. But at what cost? I had killed the shogun, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was only the beginning. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace. Part 6. The scent clung to me, a cloying sweetness masking something far more sinister. It emanated from the obi, the silken sash Lord Ashikaga had gifted me, a gesture I now saw as laced with a chilling intent. The scent was identical to the one that permeated the abandoned wing, the one where the whispers lived. It was the smell of decay disguised as blossoms, of death masquerading as life. Sleep offered no escape. Dreams of faceless women, with vacant eyes and mouths sewn shut, danced behind my eyelids. Their silent screams echoed in my mind, a chorus of unspeakable horrors. I awoke each morning more drained than the last, the oppressive atmosphere of the palace seeping into my bones. The giggling of the handmaidens, once a comforting sound, now grated on my nerves, their painted smiles seeming more like grotesque masks. I confided in Ren, the palace gardener, the only person I felt I could remotely trust. He listened patiently, his weathered face creased with concern. "The whispers, Hana," he said, his voice low. "They are not just whispers, they are the echoes of suffering. This palace, it holds a dark heart." He told me tales of the shogun's past, of his insatiable ambition, and the lengths he would go to secure his power. Stories whispered in hushed tones of rivals mysteriously disappearing, of families falling from grace, of unsettling rituals performed under the cover of darkness. Ren's words painted a grim picture, confirming my growing suspicion that Lord Ashikaga was not the benevolent ruler he pretended to be. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I ventured back to the abandoned wing. The air was stagnant, heavy with the sickeningly sweet scent. I followed the whispers, a ghostly trail leading me deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. I found a hidden chamber, concealed behind a tapestry depicting a serene garden. The reality behind the tapestry was anything but serene. The room was small, circular, and devoid of furniture except for a low stone altar in the center. Dried, dark stains, disturbingly similar to blood, marred the surface. A single flickering candle cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a malevolent life of their own. The whispers here were louder, almost tangible, a chilling cacophony that pressed against my eardrums. I noticed scratch marks on the walls, deep gouges in the stone that spoke of desperate struggles. And then I saw them. Tucked beneath the altar, almost hidden in the shadows, were small, intricately carved wooden dolls. Dozens of them, each one uniquely crafted, yet all sharing a disturbing similarity. Their eyes were sewn shut with thick, black thread. As I reached for one, a cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candle and plunging me into darkness. The whispers intensified, morphing into guttural growls that seemed to surround me. Panic clawed at my throat, threatening to suffocate me. I stumbled back, my hands outstretched, desperate to find my way out. I collided with something cold and solid. A hand clamped over my mouth, stifling my scream. A voice, raspy and close to my ear, whispered, "Curiosity can be a dangerous thing, little bird." The hand released my mouth, but the grip on my arm tightened. A flint sparked, and a small lantern ignited, revealing the face of Lord Ashikaga. His eyes, usually warm and inviting, were now cold, devoid of any emotion. He held the lantern aloft, illuminating the room and the dolls scattered beneath the altar. "You shouldn't be here, Hana," he said, his voice smooth yet edged with steel. "This part of the palace is off limits." My mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before me with the kind lord I thought I knew. "What are these dolls?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent shivers down my spine. "They are a reminder," he said, his gaze fixed on the dolls. "A reminder of the price of disobedience." He picked up one of the dolls, turning it over in his hands. "Each one represents a soul silenced," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "A secret kept safe within these walls." My blood ran cold. The whispers, the scent, the abandoned wing, it all clicked into place. This wasn't a palace, it was a tomb. And Lord Ashikaga wasn't a benevolent ruler, he was a monster. He turned to me, his eyes now gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "You are clever, Hana," he said, his voice laced with a chilling undertone. "Perhaps too clever for your own good. Be careful. Curiosity can lead to unfortunate consequences." "Smiles." He handed me the doll, its sewn-shut eyes staring blankly at me. "Keep this," he said, his smile widening. "A small token of our friendship." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the darkness with the whispers and the chilling weight of the doll in my hand. I knew then that I was trapped, entangled in a web of secrets far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. And the scent of decay, once a subtle unease, now clung to me like a shroud, a constant reminder of the horrors hidden within the Shogun's palace. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 7. The scent of plum blossoms, usually a comfort, now felt cloying, thick with the unspoken dread that permeated the palace. The whispers continued, growing more insistent, weaving their way into the rustling of silk kimonos and the gentle clatter of teacups. The women of the court, usually so vibrant, now moved like porcelain dolls, their painted smiles brittle and fragile. Even Lord Masamune seemed affected, his jovial laughter replaced by a strained politeness, his eyes constantly darting towards the shadowed corners of the vast rooms. I continued my charade, attending tea ceremonies and flower-arranging classes, all the while searching for any clue to the source of the unsettling atmosphere. My nights were spent exploring the labyrinthine corridors, my footsteps muffled by tabi socks, searching for the hidden passages I knew existed. The blueprints I'd stolen were intricate, revealing a network of secret tunnels and chambers beneath the palace, but the entrances remained elusive, concealed behind sliding panels and false walls, their mechanisms silent and undetectable. One stifling afternoon, as I practiced calligraphy in the garden pavilion, Lady Hana approached. Her usually bright eyes were shadowed with worry. "Kasumi-san," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drone of cicadas. "Have you heard the weeping?" I feigned ignorance, my brush continuing its elegant strokes across the rice paper. "Weeping? Lady Hana, I haven't noticed anything amiss." She glanced nervously around, her hand fluttering to her throat. "It starts after midnight, a low, mournful sound, like a woman crying. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere." My pulse quickened. This was new, another layer added to the growing unease. "Perhaps it is just the wind, Lady Hana," I offered, though the words felt hollow even to my own ears. She shook her head, her elaborate hairstyle swaying. "No, Kasumi-san, it's not the wind. It's something else." She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear, the servants whisper that it's the spirit of Lady Akiko. Lady Akiko, the shogun's previous consort, who had died mysteriously a year before my arrival. Her death had been attributed to a sudden illness, but rumors of foul play had persisted. I had dismissed them as court gossip, but now... That night I waited. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the tatami mats. The palace was silent, save for the chirping of crickets and the rhythmic creak of the old wooden beams. Then, just as Lady Hana had described, I heard it. A low, keening wail, faint at first, then growing in intensity. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, echoing through the corridors, weaving a tapestry of sorrow. It was a sound filled with such despair, such raw anguish, that it sent a shiver down my spine. I crept out of my room, my hand resting on the hilt of my tanto, and followed the sound. It led me to the west wing, a section of the palace that was rarely used. The air here was colder, heavier, and the scent of plum blossoms was replaced by a faint, metallic odor. The weeping intensified, drawing me closer to a large, ornately carved door. I recognized it from the blueprints, the entrance to one of the hidden passages. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the source of the weeping, the key to the palace's secrets. I reached for the door, my hand trembling. As my fingers brushed against the cold wood, the weeping abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was even more unnerving. Holding my breath, I pushed the door open. The room beyond was pitch black, the darkness absolute. The faint metallic smell was stronger here, acrid and clinging to the back of my throat. I fumbled for my flint and steel, striking them together. A small spark ignited, illuminating the room for a fleeting moment. It was enough. Enough to see the bloodstains on the tatami mats. Enough to see the scattered fragments of bone. Enough to see the long, black hair clinging to the wall, matted and damp. The spark died, plunging the room back into darkness. The weeping began again, closer now, right behind me. I spun around, my tanto raised, but there was nothing there. Only the darkness and the weeping, and the chilling realization that I was not alone. I stumbled back, my hands scrabbling for the door. My fingers found the latch, and I flung it open, spilling back into the corridor, gasping for breath. The moonlight seemed blindingly bright after the oppressive darkness of the room. I didn't look back, I ran. Back to my room, back to the illusion of safety, the weeping echoing in my ears. I knew then, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Lady Akiko's death was no accident. And whatever darkness lurked within the palace walls was far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. My mission, once so clear, now felt shadowed by a growing sense of dread. I was no longer just a spy. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, trapped in a web of secrets and lies, with something far more sinister than the shogun pulling the strings. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace. Part 8. The porcelain mask remained on Lord Katsuro's face, an impassive, unsettling moon in the dim light of the inner sanctum. He hadn't moved since he'd uttered those chilling words. "She sees you, Kasumi." The air crackled with a strange energy, a palpable tension that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. My hand instinctively went to the kunai strapped to my thigh, a meager comfort against the unseen force pressing in on me. Who saw me? What did they see? My disguise? My true purpose? Lord Katsuro finally moved, his gloved hand reaching out to a small, lacquered box on the altar. He opened it with agonizing slowness, revealing a single, withered black rose. Its petals were brittle, edges crumbling into dust, yet it emanated a sickly sweet scent, like decay masked by perfume. "The Kurobara," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It blooms only in the presence of untruth." My heart hammered against my ribs. Untruth. Was he speaking of my deception? My mission to infiltrate the palace and uncover his secrets? The fear, a cold serpent, coiled tighter around my gut. "She knows your name," Katsuro continued, lifting the Kurobara to his masked face. The petals brushed against the porcelain, and I swear I heard a faint, dry rustling, like the whispering of ghosts. "She knows the blood that flows in your veins." My clan, my family, were they in danger? Had Katsuro's reach extended beyond these gilded walls and into the hidden villages of the shadows? I had to stay calm. I had to maintain my composure. My mission, the safety of my clan, depended on it. "Kasumi, daughter of the Shadow Moon," Katsuro's voice echoed, amplified by the confines of the sanctum. He lowered the rose, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something behind the mask. Not malice, not anger, but sadness? "Tell me, Kasumi," he said, his voice softening, almost pleading. "What do you seek within these walls?" I hesitated. Could I trust him? Could I reveal even a sliver of the truth? The Kurobara, the unsettling atmosphere, his cryptic words, it all screamed danger. Yet, there was a strange vulnerability emanating from him. A crack in the facade of the powerful shogun's advisor. I seek knowledge," I finally replied, my voice barely a whisper. Knowledge of the ancient scrolls, the forbidden texts. It wasn't entirely a lie. My mission did involve uncovering information about the shogun's plans rumored to involve those very scrolls. Katsuro remained silent for a long moment, the only sound the crackling of the incense burning in the braziers. Then, he slowly nodded. Knowledge is a dangerous thing, Kasumi, he said, placing the Kurobara back in the lacquered box. It can illuminate, but it can also consume. He turned to face me, the mask still obscuring his features. The scrolls you seek, they hold secrets best left undisturbed. Secrets that can shatter empires and break the very fabric of reality. My curiosity, always a dangerous companion, was now burning fiercely. What secrets did these scrolls contain? What power did Katsura hold? Show me, I said, my voice stronger now, emboldened by a reckless desire to know. Show me these secrets. Katsuro chuckled, a low, dry sound that sent shivers down my spine. Not yet, Kasumi, not yet. First you must prove yourself worthy. He gestured towards a shadowed corner of the sanctum. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw a figure emerge, small, hunched, wrapped in dark robes. It moved with an unsettling fluidity, like a spider scuttling across its web. This is she who sees, Katsuro said, his voice laced with an unsettling reverence. She will be your guide. She will test you. The figure stopped before me, its face hidden within the depths of its hood. A skeletal hand emerged, its bony fingers beckoning me forward. A wave of nausea washed over me. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The scent of the Kurobara intensified, filling my nostrils with the cloying sweetness of decay. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was a turning point. I could refuse, turn back, and try to salvage my mission in another way. Or I could follow this creature into the unknown and face whatever horrors awaited me within the shadowed depths of the Shogun's palace. My hand tightened on the hilt of my kunai. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. I am ready, I said, my voice trembling slightly. The skeletal hand reached out, its touch cold as ice, and grasped my arm. And as I followed she who sees deeper into the darkness, I knew, with a sinking heart, that I had just made a terrible mistake. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 9. The scent of decay, once a subtle undercurrent, now clung to me like a shroud. I couldn't wash it off, not truly. Even the fragrant blossoms of the palace gardens, tended with such meticulous care, couldn't mask the rot that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the place. The whispers had intensified. No longer confined to the shadows, they now snaked through the corridors during the day, slithering through conversations, twisting words into mocking echoes. They spoke of things best left unheard, of shadowed rituals and forgotten shrines, of the Shogun's dark obsession, and of me. They used my name, hissed with a chilling familiarity that sent shivers crawling down my spine. Lord Akiyama had become increasingly withdrawn. His once bright eyes were now clouded with a perpetual weariness, the corners of his mouth permanently downturned. He still visited me, but his touch had become hesitant, almost fearful. One evening he confessed that he too heard the whispers, a revelation that solidified my growing suspicion. This wasn't just in my head. The palace itself was poisoned. Sleep had become a battlefield. Every night I wrestled with nightmares, visions of faceless figures cloaked in black, their movements unnervingly fluid, their silent laughter echoing through the desolate halls of my dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the whispers still clinging to the edges of my hearing, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I decided to investigate the abandoned West Wing. The guards, normally vigilant, seemed strangely oblivious to my movements. It was as though a veil of apathy had fallen over the palace, dulling their senses and leaving them susceptible to the insidious whispers. The West Wing was a testament to forgotten grandeur. Cobwebs draped across ornate furnishings, dust lay thick on the tatami mats, and the air hung heavy with the smell of mildew and something else, something acrid, metallic, that made my stomach churn. As I moved deeper into the wing, the whispers intensified, coalescing into distinct voices, chanting in a language I didn't understand, yet felt deep within my bones. I found a hidden chamber concealed behind a tapestry depicting a ferocious oni. Inside, the air was suffocatingly thick, and the chanting reached a fever pitch. My hand trembled as I lit a lamp, the flickering flame revealing a scene that chilled me to the core. The walls were covered in strange symbols, similar to those I'd seen on the dead geisha. In the center of the room, a low stone altar was stained with a dark, viscous substance that glistened in the lamplight. A single, withered chrysanthemum lay upon it, its petals curled inwards like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, the chanting stopped. A bone-chilling silence descended, broken only by the frantic beating of my heart. I felt a presence behind me, cold and malevolent. Slowly, I turned. Standing in the doorway was a figure shrouded in darkness. The only visible features were two glowing red eyes that burned with an unnatural intensity. The figure raised a hand, and I saw what looked like a ceremonial dagger, its blade shimmering with an oily blackness. Terror seized me. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place. The figure glided towards me, its movements unnervingly silent. Just as the dagger lunged towards my heart, a voice shattered the silence. "Stop!" Lord Akiyama stood in the doorway, his face pale, his hand gripping the hilt of his katana. The shrouded figure hesitated, its red eyes flickering between me and the Lord. "Who are you?" Akiyama demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the palace. Then, with a speed that defied human comprehension, it vanished. Akiyama rushed to my side, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right, Kasumi?" I could only nod, still too shaken to speak. The experience had left me drained. The whispers, now echoing louder than ever, buzzing in my ears like a swarm of angry insects. "We have to leave this place," Akiyama said, his voice low and urgent. "It's not safe." His words confirmed my deepest fears. The palace wasn't just haunted, it was corrupted, a breeding ground for something dark and ancient, and I, entangled in its web of secrets, was running out of time. But leaving wouldn't be easy. The shogun's eyes were everywhere, and escape, especially with a highly placed lord, would be near impossible. Moreover, something held me back. A morbid curiosity, a need to understand the darkness that was consuming the palace, and perhaps myself. As we left the West Wing, the whispers followed us, their voices laced with a new, sinister tone, as if promising a swift and terrible retribution. The chilling premonition washed over me that this was just the beginning, a prelude to a horror far greater than I could ever have imagined. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 10. The scent, that cloying sweetness I now associated with death, clung to me like a shroud. I scrubbed my skin raw, the harsh lye soap stinging my chapped hands, but I couldn't rid myself of the feeling that Lord Akiyama's essence, somehow corrupted and vile, lingered on me. I saw his face in the swirling steam, his eyes vacant yet accusatory. Sleep offered no solace. Nightmares, vivid and grotesque, haunted me. I dreamt of silken ropes turning to serpents, of the whispering voices in the shadows solidifying into monstrous shapes. I avoided the shogun's presence as much as possible, feigning illness, claiming duties that kept me far from the inner sanctum. But he sent for me, eventually. The summons, delivered by the ever-silent Kenzo, felt like a death sentence. The shogun's chambers were different. Gone were the vibrant silks and ornate tapestries. In their place hung stark white drapes, rustling like ghostly whispers. The air was thick with the pungent smell of incense, attempting to mask the underlying sweetness that I still couldn't escape. The shogun sat on a low cushion, dressed all in white, his face pale and gaunt. He looked fragile. "Kasumi," he said, his voice a dry rustle, "you seem troubled." "My lord," I replied, bowing low, my heart hammering against my ribs, "I have been unwell." He waved a dismissive hand. "I speak not of physical ailments. I sense a darkness within you." My blood ran cold. Did he know? Did he suspect my involvement in Akiyama's death? I forced myself to meet his gaze, praying my fear didn't betray me. "My lord, you flatter me. I am but a humble servant." He chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "Humility is a virtue, Kasumi, but it cannot mask the truth. You carry a weight, a burden. Tell me, what troubles your heart?" I considered lying, deflecting, but something in his hollow eyes told me that evasion would be futile. And perhaps a small, desperate part of me hoped that confession, even a partial one, might offer some relief. "My lord," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I have witnessed, unsettling things within these walls. Unsettling? He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. Tell me more. I hesitated. How much could I reveal without incriminating myself? I spoke of the whispers, the strange occurrences, the growing sense of unease that permeated the palace. I even hinted at the unnatural silence that had fallen upon Lord Akiyama's chambers the night he died, carefully omitting any mention of the silken cords or the shadows. The shogun listened intently, his pale face growing even whiter as I spoke. When I finished, he remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. The palace is changing, he finally whispered, his voice laced with a strange mixture of fear and awe. It has a will of its own, a hunger. My breath hitched. He knew. He felt it too. The suffocating presence that was slowly consuming the palace, twisting its inhabitants, feeding on their life force. But he didn't seem to connect it to the deaths, to the disappearances. He seemed to view it as some kind of divine phenomenon, a force of nature beyond his control. "My lord," I ventured, my voice trembling slightly, "what can be done?" He smiled, a thin, brittle smile that sent shivers down my spine. "We must appease it, Kasumi. We must offer it sustenance." My stomach lurched. Sustenance? What did he mean? Before I could question him further, a chilling wail echoed through the palace, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. It was a sound of pure anguish, of something ancient and malevolent. The shogun flinched, his eyes widening in terror. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "It calls for us, Kasumi," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wail. "We must not keep it waiting." He pulled me to my feet, leading me towards the hidden passage behind the tapestry. The wailing grew louder, more insistent, as if urging us forward. My mind screamed in protest, my body desperate to flee, but the shogun's grip was like iron. He dragged me down the dark passage, the air growing colder, the scent of sweetness intensifying with each step. I knew with a terrifying certainty that we were walking into a trap, that the palace itself was luring us to our doom. But there was nothing I could do. I was caught in its web, a helpless fly, caught in the sticky strands of a spider's silken snare. The wail reached a crescendo, and I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable horror that awaited us in the darkness. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 11. The whispers started the next night, faint at first, like the rustling of silk in an empty room. I dismissed them as the wind playing tricks, the settling of the ancient palace, the scurrying of rats in the walls. But they persisted, growing more insistent, weaving themselves into my dreams. They spoke my name, a sibilant hiss in the darkness. Kasumi. Kasumi. Sleep became a battlefield. I'd jolt awake, heart pounding, kunai gripped tight, only to find my room bathed in the pale moonlight, silent and undisturbed. But the unease remained, a cold knot in my stomach. I started seeing things in the periphery, fleeting shadows that vanished when I turned my head. My reflexes, honed over years of training, became twitchy, my senses strained. I felt watched, hunted, even within the supposedly secure walls of the shogun's inner sanctum. The whispers intensified, no longer confined to the night. I heard them during the day, slithering through the corridors, hiding in the laughter of the courtiers, the clinking of sake cups. They were always just behind me, just out of reach, whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp. The garden remembers," they hissed, their voices cold and damp like the earth after a rain. The garden. The shogun's private garden was a place of serene beauty, a carefully cultivated paradise within the palace walls. But since the incident with Lord Akiyama, I'd avoided it, a primal fear gripping me whenever I neared its ornate gates. Now the whispers seemed to be drawing me there, an irresistible pull towards something unknown and terrifying. One moonless night, I couldn't resist the call any longer. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I slipped out of my chambers, my footsteps echoing eerily in the silent corridors. The air grew heavy with a cloying sweetness as I approached the garden, the scent of night-blooming jasmine thick and oppressive. The guards at the gate stood motionless, their faces obscured by shadows. They didn't challenge me, their silence more unsettling than any outcry would have been. As I stepped into the garden, the whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex of sound. He waits for you, Kasumi. The moon, hidden behind a veil of clouds, cast long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like restless spirits. The familiar paths, once so peaceful, now seemed menacing, leading me deeper into the heart of the garden. The air grew colder, the scent of jasmine replaced by the metallic tang of blood. I reached the pond, its surface as still and black as obsidian. The koi, usually vibrant and active, were nowhere to be seen. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the stone edge, a rhythmic pulse in the oppressive silence. Then I saw it. A single, blood-red lotus blossom floated on the surface of the pond, its petals unfurling like a macabre invitation. It pulsed with an unnatural light, casting a crimson glow on the surrounding water. As I watched, mesmerized, the petals began to open further, revealing a dark, pulsating center. "Kasumi," a voice whispered, seemingly emanating from the heart of the lotus. It wasn't the sibilant whisper that had haunted me for days. This voice was deeper, resonant, laced with a chilling familiarity. "Lord Akiyama." I stumbled back, my hand instinctively going to the kunai, strapped to my thigh. The lotus blossom continued to open, its dark center widening, revealing a swirling vortex of shadows. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, chilling command. "Join me, Kasumi." Terror choked me. I wanted to run, to scream, to escape the suffocating dread that enveloped me. But I was rooted to the spot, my gaze fixed on the pulsating darkness within the lotus. I felt a strange pull towards it, a morbid fascination with the abyss that awaited me. Then, a new sound pierced the silence. A low, guttural growl coming from the shadows beneath the weeping willows. It grew louder, closer, accompanied by the rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs. Something was moving towards me, something large and predatory. My eyes darted towards the source of the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows shifted, revealing a pair of glowing red eyes, burning with malevolent intent. A low growl rumbled through the air, closer now, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever lurked in the shadows was not human. The whispers, the lotus, Lord Akiyama's voice. It was all a trap. I had been lured into the garden, not to join him, but to become prey for something far more sinister. I drew my kunai, its cold steel, a small comfort in the face of the unknown horror that awaited me. The growl intensified, and the creature emerged from the shadows. To be continued. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 12. The scent of decay clung to me, a second skin I couldn't shed. The earth beneath the hidden passage was damp and cold, a stark contrast to the oppressive, incense-laden air of the palace above. Each scrape of my knees against the dirt, each rustle of my silk against the rough-hewn walls felt like a betrayal, a whisper in the silent dark that I was no longer welcome above. I carried the porcelain mask in my hands, its painted smile a mocking grin in the dim light filtering from the single concealed entrance. I hadn't known the Oni existed outside of whispered legends, boogeymen to frighten unruly children. Yet there it was, or rather, Fisupo it was. Lord Akiyama, the Shogun's favored advisor, revealed as something monstrous, something inhuman. The memory of the transformation churned in my stomach. The unnatural cracking of bone, the stretching of skin, the hollow, echoing growl that replaced his smooth, diplomatic voice. And then, the eyes. The glowing crimson eyes, devoid of any trace of the man I thought I knew. I had seen the Oni feed, the image of Lady Hana, her vibrant kimono now a tattered, blood-soaked shroud, haunted my every waking moment and the fleeting snatches of sleep I dared to steal. He had consumed her, not in the ravenous way a beast might tear at flesh, but with a chilling, almost ritualistic precision, as if he were absorbing her, her life force becoming a part of him. And now, he wore her face, not literally, but in a way that was far more unsettling. His mannerisms, his delicate gestures, the tilt of his head when he spoke, all echoes of Lady Hana. It was as if the Oni was wearing her memories, her personality, like a grotesque costume. My mission was no longer about political intrigue, about stolen documents and whispered secrets. It was about survival. My own, and perhaps the survival of everyone within the palace walls. I had to find a way to expose him, to stop him before he claimed another victim. The passage opened into a small, forgotten shrine, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in a perpetual twilight. A crumbling statue of Inari, the fox god, stood watch, its face worn smooth by time and neglect. I lit a small oil lamp, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the cracked walls. I knew I couldn't confide in anyone. Not Lord Asano, my contact within the palace, not even my own clan. The Oni's influence was too far-reaching, his deception too complete. To speak of him, of what I had witnessed, would be to invite ridicule, or worse, to be branded a traitor, a madwoman. I spent the next few days in the hidden shrine, venturing out only under the cover of darkness to gather information. I studied the palace routines, searching for patterns, for any weaknesses in the Oni's facade. I learned that he rarely slept, spending his nights poring over ancient scrolls in the shogun's library, a room forbidden to all but a select few. One night I found a discarded scrap of parchment amongst the ashes of the library fireplace. It was written in a language I didn't recognize, a series of intricate symbols and swirling glyphs. I knew instinctively that it was connected to the Oni, to the dark ritual I had witnessed. I took the parchment to the shrine, laying it out on the cracked stone altar. I spent hours studying it, comparing the symbols to the few texts I had access to on ancient folklore and forgotten magic. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to decipher the meaning. It was a ritual of possession, a way for the Oni to absorb the life force and memories of its victims, to wear their identities like a mask. And the parchment detailed the next stage of the ritual, a sacrifice of immense power, one that would solidify the Oni's control over the shogun, over the entire kingdom. The target was Princess Kasumi, the shogun's only daughter. A cold dread gripped me. The princess was young, barely a woman, known for her gentle nature and unwavering devotion to her father. The Oni, disguised as Lord Akiyama, had wormed his way into the shogun's confidence, poisoning his mind against his own daughter, subtly isolating her from the rest of the court. He was preparing her, grooming her for the sacrifice. I knew what I had to do. I had to warn the princess, to expose the Oni's true nature before it was too late. But how? The Oni watched her every move, his influence suffocating her like a shroud. Any attempt to reach her directly would be suicide. As I sat in the shrine, surrounded by the whispering darkness and the scent of decay, a plan began to form, a dangerous, desperate gamble. I would use the Oni's own methods against him, turning his deception into my weapon. I would become a ghost, a whisper in the shadows, planting seeds of doubt, of fear, in the minds of those closest to him. It was a risky plan, one that could easily backfire, but I had no other choice. The princess's life, and perhaps the fate of the entire kingdom, hung in the balance. And I, a Kunoichi spy hiding in the shadows, was the only one who could stop him. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace, Part 13. The scent of wisteria, once a comfort, now felt suffocating. Each bloom seemed to mock me with its innocent beauty, a stark contrast to the shadows that clung to the palace walls. The whispers continued, slithering into my dreams, twisting my memories into grotesque parodies. Kasumi's laughter, once bright and melodic, now echoed with a chilling hollowness, each giggle a sharp shard of ice piercing my heart. The shogun, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant, continued his strange rituals. More courtiers disappeared, their absence explained away as sudden illness or urgent family matters. But the whispers knew. They spoke of secret passages, of rooms hidden deep beneath the palace, of chanting that rose and fell with the rhythm of a morbid heartbeat. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I resumed my nightly explorations. The jade amulet, pulsating faintly against my skin, seemed to guide me, pulling me towards the heart of the palace's darkness. I avoided the patrolled corridors, favoring the network of secret tunnels and forgotten passageways I'd discovered during my initial reconnaissance. The air in these hidden spaces was heavy, with a stench of mildew and something else, something acrid and metallic that made my stomach churn. One night, I found myself standing before a sealed door, hidden behind a tapestry depicting a serene mountain landscape. The amulet vibrated fiercely against my chest, burning my skin. This was it. I could feel it. My fingers, trembling, traced the outline of the door. There were no hinges, no handle, just a smooth, unbroken surface of dark wood. As I pressed my ear against the cool surface, I heard it. The chanting, low and guttural, it pulsed like a diseased heart, punctuated by the rhythmic splashing of something. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to see. I had to know. Recalling techniques passed down through generations of my clan, I applied pressure to specific points on the door, feeling for the hidden mechanisms. A soft click reverberated through the wood, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Taking a deep breath, I slipped through the opening. The passage was damp and claustrophobic, the air thick with the same metallic stench. The amulet glowed faintly, illuminating the rough-hewn stone steps that spiraled downwards. The chanting grew louder with each step, intermingling with a wet, rhythmic sloshing sound that sent shivers down my spine. The passage opened into a large, circular chamber. Torches flickered on the walls, casting dancing shadows that distorted the horrific scene before me. In the center of the chamber was a stone altar, stained a dark, rusty brown, and on that altar, I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. It was a courtier, one I recognized from the shogun's inner circle. He was naked, his body contorted in an unnatural position, his eyes wide and staring, devoid of life. His chest was open, a gaping cavity where his heart should have been. The shogun stood over him, clad in a crimson robe, a ceremonial dagger clutched in his hand. Around him, a circle of figures, faces obscured by grotesque masks, chanted in unison. The rhythmic sloshing sound I'd heard was the sound of the shogun's dagger plunging into a basin filled with blood. The shogun raised the dagger, now dripping with crimson, and brought it to his lips. He drank deeply, a look of ecstatic fervor on his face. Then he turned, his gaze locking onto mine. The masked figures stopped chanting, their heads swiveling towards me like grotesque puppets on strings. The shogun smiled, a slow, chilling smile that revealed teeth-stained red. "You found us," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. "I was wondering when you would." My breath hitched in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. The amulet pulsed against my chest, burning hotter than ever. "You see," the shogun continued, stepping towards me, his crimson robe swirling around him like a shroud, "we are performing a sacred ritual. A ritual to appease the ancient ones. A ritual to ensure prosperity and longevity." He paused, his eyes glinting in the torchlight. "And you, my dear Kunoichi, will be our next offering." The masked figures advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural. I knew I couldn't fight them all. I was trapped. But then, something shifted within me. A cold, hard resolve solidified in my gut, replacing the fear. I was a Kunoichi, a shadow warrior. And I would not go down without a fight. My hand went to the tanto strapped to my thigh. The amulet burned against my skin, a beacon of defiance in the heart of the shogun's darkness. The hunt had become the hunted. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace. Part 14. The scent of wisteria, once a comfort, now choked me. It clung to the air, thick and cloying, like the whispers that followed me through the twisting corridors of the palace. The whispers had become more insistent, less ethereal, tinged with a guttural quality that made the hairs on my arms prickle. I could almost feel their breath on my neck, cold and damp like the earth of a freshly dug grave. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall, the rough surface, a meager comfort. The obi tightened around my chest, restricting my breathing. The porcelain mask I wore, a symbol of my service, felt heavier than ever, a suffocating weight pressing against my skin. I had seen him again. The flickering shadow in the shogun's private gardens. Tall and emaciated, with limbs that seemed too long for its body, it moved with an unsettling grace. The first time I had glimpsed it, I dismissed it as a trick of the moonlight, a figment of my increasingly frayed nerves. Now I knew better. It was real, and it was watching me. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, chilling word. Akai, Red, my code name. The secret identity I had so meticulously crafted was unraveling, thread by crimson thread. My mission was simple: infiltrate the Shogun's court, gather intelligence, and report back to my clan. But the palace was a labyrinth of secrets, a breeding ground for paranoia and whispers. The longer I stayed, the more I felt the walls closing in, the shadows deepening. The line between reality and illusion blurred, and I began to question my own sanity. Was I truly a Kunoichi, a master of stealth and deception, or was I just a pawn in a game I didn't understand, slowly being driven mad by the palace's insidious influence? I pushed myself off the wall and continued my patrol, my hand resting on the hilt of my tanto. The corridor stretched before me, seemingly endless, lit by flickering lanterns that cast grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. The silence was broken only by the soft padding of my footsteps and the incessant whispers, now a chorus of voices swirling around my head. I reached the entrance to the Shogun's private chambers. 2 samurai guards stood sentinel, their faces impassive, their eyes fixed on the ornate doors. I could feel their gaze on me, cold and scrutinizing. I bowed my head slightly in acknowledgement and continued past, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to find a way to escape this suffocating palace. My mission was compromised. The whispers had exposed me, but escape was impossible. The palace was a fortress, and I was trapped within its walls, a prisoner of its secrets. As I rounded a corner, I saw it again, the shadow. It stood at the end of the corridor, bathed in the pale moonlight that filtered through a nearby window. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, its long, spindly fingers twitching. The whispers reached a crescendo, filling my ears with a cacophony of voices. Akai, Akai. Terror seized me, paralyzing me in place. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. My body refused to obey. I could only stand there, frozen in fear, as the shadow began to glide towards me, its movements unnervingly smooth, like a specter drifting on the wind. As it drew closer, I could make out its features. Its face was gaunt and pale, its eyes hollow sockets that seemed to absorb the light. Its lips were pulled back in a grotesque smile, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. It was not human. The whispers intensified, becoming a single, piercing shriek. Akai! I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The shadow lunged, its long fingers reaching for me. I dodged its grasp, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to escape. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The shadow pursued me, its laughter a chilling counterpoint to my panicked breaths. I could feel its presence behind me, its cold breath on my neck. I reached a dead end. A wall of intricately carved wood blocked my path. I spun around, facing the shadow. It stood before me, its eyes burning into mine, its smile widening. "Paquet, pass it," whispered, its voice a rasping hiss. "We know who you are." I drew my tanto, the cold steel a small comfort in my trembling hand. I knew I couldn't defeat it, but I would not surrender without a fight. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The shadow's smile widened further, revealing its pointed teeth. "We are the whispers," it hissed. "We are the secrets of the palace, and we are hungry." Its hand shot out, faster than I could react, and seized my throat. I gasped for air, my vision blurring. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, consuming me. The last thing I saw was the shadow's face, its hollow eyes burning with an unholy light, before darkness swallowed me whole. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 15. The whispering intensified. It no longer seemed to emanate from the walls, but from the very air itself, clinging to me like the dampness of the dungeon. It slithered into my ears, a sibilant chorus of voices that spoke my name, knew my deepest fears, my hidden desires. They promised power, whispered of secrets held within the palace walls, secrets that could shatter the shogunate and reshape the land. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the whispers burrowed deeper, echoing within my skull. My breath hitched in my throat. The kanji etched onto the oni mask seemed to shift and writhe, their strokes thickening like congealing blood. I ripped the mask from my face, but the whispering persisted, louder now, mocking my futile attempts at silence. The mask, even discarded on the floor, seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural light. Fear, cold and viscous, coiled in my gut. This was beyond the whispers of disgruntled spirits, or the machinations of Lady Hana. This was something ancient, something hungry. Driven by a primal need to escape the suffocating whispers, I scrambled to my feet. The corridor stretched before me, seemingly endless, the lanterns casting long, flickering shadows that danced like grotesque puppets. The air grew heavy, thick with a cloying sweetness that stung my nostrils. I stumbled forward, the whispering clinging to me like a shroud. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the cold stone floor. The corridor twisted and turned, a labyrinth designed to disorient and trap. I passed closed doors, each one a dark, silent maw that seemed to breathe. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, a palpable sensation that made my skin crawl. Then, I saw it, a faint light emanating from a crack beneath a heavy oak door. Hope surged through me, a fragile flicker in the suffocating darkness. I pounded on the door, my knuckles raw, my voice hoarse. "Help me," I cried, my voice cracking. "Please, someone." Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate scraping sound from within, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. The whispering intensified, swirling around me, a vortex of malice. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to decipher the sounds within. A low, guttural growl echoed through the wood, sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't human. Terror lent me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I threw my weight against the door, splintering the wood around the lock. It swung inward with a groan, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber. The air inside was thick, with the smell of incense and decay. In the center of the room, a single flickering candle illuminated a grotesque tableau. A woman, dressed in the tattered remnants of a court kimono, knelt on the floor, her back to me. Her long, black hair cascaded around her like a shroud. She was rocking back and forth, muttering to herself in a low, monotonous voice. Beside her, a large, ornate chest lay open, its contents spilled across the floor. Gold and jewels glittered in the candlelight, but my eyes were drawn to something else. A collection of small, intricately carved wooden dolls. Each one was dressed in miniature versions of court attire, their faces frozen in expressions of serene indifference. As I stepped into the room, the woman stopped rocking and slowly turned her head. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wide and vacant. Her lips were drawn back in a rictus grin, revealing a row of yellowed, pointed teeth. A single, thick strand of hair hung across her face, partially obscuring a deep, festering wound on her cheek. "Lost, little bird?" she croaked, her voice raspy and hollow. "The whispers led you astray." I backed away slowly, my hand instinctively reaching for the kunai hidden beneath my tattered clothing. The woman's grin widened and she gestured towards the scattered dolls. "They hunger," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the relentless chorus in my head. "They hunger for secrets, for souls." One of the dolls, a miniature representation of the shogun himself, twitched. Its head snapped up, its painted eyes seeming to fix on me with unnerving intensity. Then, another doll moved, and another, until all of them were staring, their painted smiles twisting into grotesque parodies of joy. The woman let out a shrill, cackling laugh that echoed through the small chamber, blending with the insidious whispers that now seemed to be coming from the dolls themselves. I knew with a chilling certainty that I had stumbled upon something far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Something that lurked beneath the glittering facade of the shogun's palace, feeding on the secrets and souls of those who dared to venture too deep. And I was trapped, caught in its web of whispers and shadows, with no escape in sight. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace. Part 16. The whispers followed me. Even as I retreated to the relative safety of my chambers, they slithered under the door, worming their way into my mind. They weren't words, not precisely. More like the rustling of silk, the scraping of bone against wood, the faintest hint of weeping. The sounds the palace made when it thought no one was listening. The scent of wisteria, overpowering and sickly sweet, clung to the air. It was the shogun's favorite, permeating his chambers and, increasingly, the rest of the palace. It masked another smell, something fainter, metallic, and subtly coppery. The scent of blood, old and new. My hand instinctively went to the small, intricately carved wooden box hidden beneath my futon. Inside nestled the jade pendant, pulsating with a faint, unsettling warmth. It was the only thing I had left of Master Hoshiko, the woman who had trained me, who had been taken by the palace, swallowed whole like so many others before her. The whispers intensified. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it was useless. They were inside me now, echoing the growing unease in my heart. I needed to act. I needed to find answers. I slipped out into the darkened corridors, my footsteps muffled by the thick tatami mats. The palace at night was a different creature entirely. The vibrant colors of the day faded into a monochromatic canvas of shadows and moonlight. The bustling activity was replaced by an oppressive stillness, punctuated only by the rustling whispers and the distant, rhythmic creaking of the palace itself, as if it were breathing. I moved towards the shogun's chambers, drawn by a morbid curiosity and a sliver of desperate hope. Perhaps I could find something there, some clue as to what was happening, what the palace was becoming. The guards outside his door were different tonight. They were taller, their armor a deeper, more sinister shade of black. They held their spears not with vigilance but with a chilling passivity, their eyes glazed over, fixated on some unseen point in the distance. They didn't react to my approach, didn't even seem to register my presence. I slipped past them, a ghost in the shadows. The shogun's chambers were bathed in the oppressive scent of wisteria. The air hung thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The ornate screens that usually adorned the walls were gone, replaced by stark, bare wood. In the center of the room, the shogun knelt before a low table, his back to me. He was chanting, his voice a low, guttural murmur that resonated through the room, weaving itself into the whispering chorus that haunted the palace. I couldn't understand the words, but they felt ancient, powerful, and deeply unsettling. On the table before him was a bowl. Not a porcelain bowl, like the ones used for tea ceremonies, but something rougher, hewn from dark, polished stone. The contents of the bowl shimmered in the flickering candlelight, a viscous, crimson liquid that pulsed with a life of its own. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The shogun didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence. He was consumed by his ritual, his chanting growing louder, more fervent. As I drew near enough to see into the bowl, a wave of nausea washed over me. The liquid wasn't just red, it was thick, with something dark and fibrous. Floating on the surface were small, white objects, bobbing gently in the crimson tide. They looked like teeth. I choked back a sob, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle the sound. The shogun continued to chant, oblivious to my presence. I wanted to run, to scream, to flee the palace, and never look back. But something held me there, a morbid fascination, a need to understand. I looked closer at the teeth, my eyes straining in the flickering candlelight. They were small, delicate, and undeniably human. And then I noticed something else. Something that sent a chill of pure terror down my spine. Etched onto each tooth, barely visible to the naked eye, was a tiny, intricate symbol. The same symbol that had been carved into Master Hoshiko's jade pendant. The same symbol I now clutched in my hand, burning against my skin. The shogun stopped chanting. The silence that followed was deafening. He slowly turned, his face illuminated by the flickering candlelight. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were blank, devoid of any emotion. His lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. "You have seen too much," he whispered, his voice raspy and unfamiliar. "Now you must join us." He reached out a hand towards me, his fingers long and pale, tipped with nails that seemed to have grown unnaturally long and sharp. The whispers around me intensified, coalescing into a single, chilling voice that echoed in my mind. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 17. The scent of decay clung to me, a ghostly perfume. I'd scrubbed myself raw in the icy stream, but the feeling, the knowledge of what I'd touched, remained. The porcelain mask, smooth and cold, had fit disturbingly well over my face. Its vacant smile, once a source of morbid fascination, now chilled me to the marrow. I saw its reflection in every polished surface, a haunting reminder of the secrets hidden within the shogun's walls. The whispers had intensified since I discovered the hidden chamber. They slithered through the palace corridors like phantom drafts, brushing against my skin, whispering half-formed words I couldn't quite grasp. The servants moved with a new, unsettling quietude, their eyes darting nervously toward shadowed corners. Even Lord Katsuyori, usually so jovial, wore a mask of strained pleasantries. I'd tried to confide in Hana, my closest ally, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the oppressive dread, the chilling certainty that something unspeakable lurked beneath the veneer of elegance and power? How could I tell her about the mask, about the way it felt like a second skin, a gateway to a darkness I didn't understand? My mission, once so clear, now felt distorted, a twisted reflection in a funhouse mirror. Retrieving the stolen scrolls seemed trivial compared to the unsettling truth I sensed was concealed within these walls. The shogun, once a figure of authority, now seemed a puppet, his movements stiff and unnatural, his gaze distant and empty. One moonless night, the whispers reached a fever pitch. I lay awake in my chambers, the silence punctuated by the frantic beating of my own heart. The shadows seemed to writhe and pulsate, taking on grotesque shapes that shifted and dissolved before my eyes. I felt a cold presence hovering near me, a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. Driven by a primal fear, I slipped out of bed and crept towards the hidden passage I discovered behind the tapestry. The stone was icy beneath my bare feet, and the air grew thick with the same cloying scent of decay. I lit a small lantern, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock my courage. The passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. I could hear the distant dripping of water, a slow, rhythmic pulse that echoed the frantic beating of my heart. Finally, I reached the chamber. The masks lined the walls, their vacant smiles gleaming in the lantern light. They seemed to watch me, their empty eyes following my every move. In the center of the room, a single, ornate chair sat bathed in an ethereal glow emanating from an unseen source. As I approached the chair, I noticed a small wooden box resting on the seat. Hesitantly, I reached out and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson silk, lay a single, withered flower. Its petals were a sickly shade of gray, its stem brittle and dry. As I touched the flower, a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and devoid of emotion. "You shouldn't have come back." I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The shogun stood in the entrance to the chamber, his face hidden in shadow. His voice was different, deeper, more resonant than I remembered. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He stepped into the light, and I gasped. His eyes, once warm and intelligent, were now vacant and black, devoid of any trace of humanity. His skin was pale and stretched taut over his bones, and his lips were pulled back in a grotesque parody of a smile. He reached out a hand, his fingers long and skeletal. "I am the one who wears the masks," he hissed. "I am the one who controls the shadows." He took a step closer, and I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively reaching for the kunai hidden beneath my robes. "You have seen too much," he continued, his voice a low growl. "Now you must become one of us." He lunged towards me, his hand outstretched, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that my mission had taken a terrifying, irreversible turn. The shogun I knew was gone, replaced by something ancient and malevolent, something that lurked in the shadows, something that wore the masks. And I, the Kunoichi spy, was trapped in its web, destined to become another victim, another mask in its gruesome collection. The withered flower slipped from my grasp and fell to the stone floor, its dry petals crumbling into dust, a silent testament to the darkness that had consumed the shogun's palace. My breath hitched in my throat, fear constricting my chest like an iron band. I knew I had to fight, to escape, but a chilling premonition told me I was already lost. The whispers were no longer whispers, they were screams, echoing the horrors that awaited me in the heart of the shogun's domain. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace, Part 18. The Oni's laughter, a wet, guttural rasp, echoed through the secret passages, chasing me like the spectral hounds of Jigoku. The scent of decay, thick and cloying, clung to the air, a chilling reminder of what awaited me if I faltered. My hand, still slick with the rancid oil I'd used to lubricate the hidden door, trembled as I pressed myself against the cold stone. The rhythmic thump of the Oni's footsteps grew closer. I could practically feel the vibrations through the wall, each thud a hammer blow against my fragile composure. I held my breath, praying to Amaterasu that the shadows would conceal me. The flickering lantern light revealed a glimpse of the Oni as it rounded the corner, its hulking form momentarily silhouetted against the flickering flames. Its single, bloodshot eye swept across the corridor, missing me by a hair's breadth. The stench intensified, a wave of nausea washing over me. I bit my lip, tasting blood, fighting the urge to scream. As the Oni continued its patrol, I forced myself to move, my muscles screaming in protest. The passage twisted and turned, a labyrinthine maze designed to confuse intruders. But I knew these tunnels like the back of my hand. They were my sanctuary, my escape route, now my only hope of survival. I stumbled upon a small alcove, barely large enough to conceal my body. Squeezing inside, I pressed my back against the rough stone, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I could hear the Oni's frustrated growl echoing through the tunnels, its heavy footsteps receding, then returning, searching, hunting. I closed my eyes, focusing on controlling my breathing, slowing the frantic thump of my heart. I needed to think. The Oni was no ordinary demon. It possessed a cunning intelligence, an unnerving awareness that set it apart from the mindless beasts I had encountered before. It was as if it knew my every move, anticipating my every thought. The image of Lord Akiyama's lifeless body flashed in my mind, his eyes wide with terror, his skin an unnatural shade of gray. The Oni had drained his life force, leaving him a hollow shell. The same fate awaited me if I didn't escape. The thought spurred me into action. I remembered a hidden chamber deeper within the palace, a forgotten room filled with ancient scrolls and forgotten artifacts. It was a dangerous place, rumored to be haunted by the vengeful spirits of the shogun's enemies, but it was also my last resort. I slipped out of the alcove, my senses heightened, every rustle and creak amplified in the suffocating silence. The Oni was still searching, its frustrated growls echoing through the tunnels like the tormented cries of the damned. I navigated the treacherous passages, my bare feet silent on the cold stone. The air grew heavy, laden with the scent of mildew and something else, something ancient and malevolent. The flickering lantern cast eerie shadows on the walls, transforming familiar shapes into grotesque monsters. Finally, I reached the hidden chamber. The entrance was concealed behind a tapestry depicting a serene landscape, a stark contrast to the horrors within. I pulled the tapestry aside, revealing a dark, narrow opening. The chamber was circular, with walls lined with shelves stacked high with ancient scrolls. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from a single flickering oil lamp in the center of the room. Shadows danced across the walls, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't understand. As I stepped inside, a cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lamp, plunging the room into absolute darkness. A chilling whisper echoed through the darkness, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You cannot hide from us," the voice hissed, sending shivers down my spine. I fumbled for my flint and steel, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I struck the flint, a shower of sparks illuminating the chamber for a fleeting moment. In that brief flash of light, I saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Pale, translucent figures, their eyes burning with an eerie green light. They were the spirits of the shogun's enemies, trapped within these walls for centuries, their anger and resentment festering like a festering wound. The whisper returned, closer now, colder. "You are one of us now," it hissed. I lit the lamp, the flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The figures were still there, their spectral forms shimmering in the dim light. They were closing in, their eyes fixed on me, their whispers growing louder, more menacing. I knew I couldn't fight them. They were spirits, incorporeal, untouchable. My only hope was to find what I needed and escape. I turned my attention to the shelves, scanning the ancient scrolls, searching for the one that held the key to my survival. The whispers intensified, the spectral figures drawing closer, their cold hands reaching out to me. I could feel their icy touch on my skin, draining the warmth from my body. My fingers brushed against a scroll bound in dark leather. I pulled it from the shelf, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the scroll containing the secret ritual that could banish the Oni. But as I unrolled the scroll, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the chamber, a scream that was both human and demonic. The Oni had found me. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 19. The air in the hidden passage felt thick, heavy with the weight of secrets and decay. The flickering lantern I carried cast grotesque shadows that danced and writhed, mimicking the unease twisting in my gut. The Oni's mask, clutched in my hand, pulsed with a faint warmth, an unsettling counterpoint to the icy air. It felt alive. Following the map Lord Akiyama had entrusted me with, I navigated the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the palace. Each turn brought me deeper into the earth, further from the gilded cages of the Shogun's court, closer to a truth I suspected was far more terrifying. The tunnels narrowed, the stonework rougher, the air growing stale with the scent of mildew and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. I reached a dead end. A smooth stone wall blocked my path, its surface unmarked. I traced my fingers across the cold stone, searching for a hidden latch, a pressure plate, anything. Panic began to claw at the edges of my composure. Was this it? A trap? Had Akiyama led me here to die? Then I remembered the mask. Hesitantly, I held the Oni mask against the wall. The moment the rough wood touched the smooth stone, a low hum vibrated through my hand and up my arm. The wall shimmered, then dissolved, revealing a narrow opening. A wave of putrid air rushed out, choking me with the stench of decay and incense. Steeling myself, I stepped through. The chamber beyond was circular, the walls lined with shelves, stacked with scrolls and strange artifacts. In the center, a low stone altar dominated the room. A single flickering candle illuminated a shallow bowl resting on the altar, its contents hidden in shadow. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of incense, masking but not entirely concealing the underlying stench of death. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw them, arranged around the altar, in a macabre parody of a tea ceremony, were the skeletal remains of at least a dozen people. Their bones were draped in faded silks, their skulls tilted towards the altar, as if in reverence. The sight sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I approached the altar cautiously, my hand hovering over the wakizashi strapped to my thigh. The candlelight flickered, revealing the contents of the bowl. It was filled with a dark, viscous liquid, its surface shimmering with an unnatural, oily sheen. The metallic scent I'd noticed in the tunnel emanated from the bowl, stronger now, thick and suffocating. I leaned closer, my stomach churning. Floating on the surface of the liquid were eyes, human eyes, staring up at me with a vacant, accusing gaze. Some were clouded with cataracts, others were clear and bright, as if freshly plucked. The sheer horror of it paralyzed me. A soft whisper, like the rustling of silk, broke the silence. Curious, isn't it? I whirled around, my hand instinctively flying to my wakizashi. Standing in the shadows near the entrance was a figure cloaked in darkness. The only visible feature was a pair of piercing yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling slightly. The figure chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that echoed through the chamber. "A friend of sorts. Or perhaps a guide." "A guide? To where?" I asked, my grip tightening on the hilt of my wakizashi. The figure stepped forward, the shadows clinging to them like a shroud. "To the truth, little Kunoichi." "The truth about the Shogun, about this palace, about the power that flows beneath these very stones." "What truth?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure stopped a few paces away, the yellow eyes burning into mine. "The truth about the Oni." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The figure reached a hand out from beneath the cloak, revealing a long, slender finger pointed towards the bowl on the altar. "The Shogun, he doesn't just wear the mask. He becomes it." The figure leaned closer, the voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. This is the price of his power. The essence of life, offered to the Oni in exchange for immortality. My breath hitched. Immortality? Was that even possible? You're lying, I stammered, trying to convince myself as much as the figure. The figure smiled, a slow, predatory grin that revealed a flash of sharp, pointed teeth. Am I? Look closer, little Kunoichi. Look into their eyes. Do you see the truth? I looked back at the bowl, at the staring eyes floating on the surface of the dark liquid. And as I looked, I saw something shift within their depths. A flicker of something ancient, something malevolent, something Oni. The figure's laughter echoed around me, a chilling sound that promised nothing but darkness. My hand tightened around the Oni mask I still clutched. It pulsed with warmth against my palm, a sinister echo of the power that resided within this chamber, and for the first time I understood the true horror of my mission. I wasn't just spying on the Shogun. I was facing something far older, far more powerful, far more terrifying than any mortal man. I was facing the Oni itself. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 20. The obsidian mirror rippled, the reflection of my terrified face dissolving into swirling smoke. From the depths of the polished darkness, a voice, thin and reedy like dry leaves skittering across cobblestones, whispered my name. Kasumi. Kasumi. My breath hitched, caught in my throat. I stumbled back, hands outstretched as if to ward off the unseen presence. The room, already cloaked in the unnatural twilight of the approaching eclipse, seemed to grow colder, the air thick with a cloying sweetness that smelled faintly of decay. Show yourself, Oni, I hissed, drawing my tanto, the familiar weight a small comfort in the suffocating fear. The mirror remained opaque, the smoke coalescing into a swirling vortex. The whispering continued, growing louder, weaving itself into a chilling lullaby. It spoke of shadows and secrets, of ancient pacts and forgotten gods. It spoke of the price of my betrayal, of the hunger that awaited me in the darkness. Then, a face. Not the Oni's grotesque visage I'd expected, but the face of Lord Akiyama, the Shogun's advisor, the man I had loved and betrayed. His eyes, once filled with warmth and laughter, were now hollow pits, reflecting the swirling void within the mirror. His lips, once soft against mine, were drawn back in a ghastly rictus, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Kasumi, he rasped, his voice a distorted echo of the man I remembered. You promised me your loyalty. You promised me your heart. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the horrifying image. Akiyama, what have they done to you? His spectral hand reached out from the mirror, cold fingers brushing against my cheek. The touch sent a shiver down my spine, a sensation of icy dread that seeped into my very bones. They have shown me the truth, Kasumi, he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. The truth about you. The truth about the shadows that cling to you. The truth about the darkness that resides within your heart. The mirror began to vibrate, the swirling smoke thickening, reaching out like grasping tendrils. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that if those tendrils touched me, I would be lost. Lost to the same darkness that had consumed Akiyama. I slashed at the mirror with my tanto, the blade ringing against the obsidian surface. The image fractured, Akiyama's face splitting into a mosaic of screaming mouths and empty eyes. The whispering intensified, morphing into a cacophony of voices, each chanting my name, each promising me power and oblivion. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room was spinning, the air thick with the stench of decay. I could feel the shadows closing in, their icy fingers brushing against my skin. Then, a single, clear voice cut through the chaos. Kasumi! Focus! It was Kenji, his voice a lifeline in the swirling darkness. I turned, my eyes searching for him in the gloom. He stood at the doorway, his face pale but resolute, his hand gripping the hilt of his katana. The eclipse, he said, his voice urgent. It's almost complete. The barrier is weakening. The barrier. The mystical barrier that protected the Shogun's palace. The barrier that had kept the Oni imprisoned for centuries. The barrier that I, in my misguided quest for revenge, had helped to weaken. I looked back at the obsidian mirror. The swirling vortex had subsided, leaving behind a smooth, reflective surface. My own reflection stared back at me, my face pale and drawn, my eyes wide with terror. But beneath the fear, I saw something else, a flicker of resolve, a spark of the Kunoichi I once was. The whispering had stopped. The room was silent, save for the pounding of my heart. The eclipse was nearing its peak, the last sliver of sunlight disappearing behind the encroaching darkness. I knew what I had to do. I turned to Kenji, my voice trembling but firm. "We need to get to the shrine," I said. "We need to stop the ritual before it's too late." He nodded, his eyes filled with a grim determination. Together, we turned and ran, leaving the haunted chamber and its whispering mirror behind. The corridors of the palace were shrouded in an unnatural twilight, the air heavy with a sense of impending doom. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, whispering promises of power and oblivion. But I would not listen. I would not succumb. I was Kasumi, the Kunoichi spy, and I would not let the shadows consume me. Not while there was still a chance to redeem myself. Not while there was still a chance to save the shogun and his kingdom from the darkness that threatened to engulf it all. The eclipse was almost complete. The final battle was about to begin. I was a Kunoichi spy in the shogun's palace, Part 21. The whispers intensified. They no longer sounded like wind through the rice paddies, but like voices, sibilant and close, just on the edge of comprehension. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very fabric of the palace, weaving themselves into the tapestries and the wood grain. I pressed my ear against the cool stone, trying to decipher them, but they slithered away like eels, leaving only a chilling sense of unease. The shogun remained sequestered. His meals were left untouched outside his door, the silence from within more terrifying than any scream. Lord Ito, his face drawn and pale, had taken to pacing the halls, muttering cryptic pronouncements about cleansing rituals and the wrath of forgotten gods. The atmosphere in the palace had become suffocating, a thick miasma of fear and superstition. Even the ever-stoic samurai guards seemed to jump at shadows, their hands never far from their katana. Driven by a gnawing dread, I returned to the abandoned wing. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay, and something else. Something acrid and metallic, like blood left to congeal in the sun. The porcelain dolls, with their unsettlingly lifelike eyes, seemed to follow me with their gaze. I found myself drawn to the room where I'd first encountered the whispering sickness. The sliding doors were ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me within. Hesitantly, I pushed the doors open, revealing a room bathed in an unnatural twilight. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by a faint, ethereal glow emanating from the far corner. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it. A small, ornate altar, draped in black silk, stood against the wall. Upon it sat a single object, a tarnished silver hand mirror. I approached cautiously, the whispers, now a cacophony in my ears. The mirror seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. I reached out a trembling hand and touched its cold, smooth surface. As my fingers brushed against the metal, the whispers abruptly ceased, replaced by a single chilling voice, clear and distinct, inside my head. "Look," it commanded. Steam Ayla. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I should turn away, flee, but a morbid curiosity held me captive. Slowly, agonizingly, I raised the mirror to my face. The reflection, staring back at me, wasn't mine. The face was vaguely familiar, the same delicate features, the same raven hair, but the eyes were hollow, black pits, devoid of life, yet burning with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. The skin was tinged with an unhealthy gray pallor, and a thin trickle of blood ran from the corner of its mouth, a grotesque parody of a smile. I gasped, dropping the mirror with a clatter. It landed face down on the tatami mat, the ethereal glow extinguished. The room plunged back into shadow, the only sound the frantic beating of my own heart. I stumbled back, my hands flying to my face, as if I could erase the image burned into my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection, the hollow eyes, the blood-stained smile. The whispers returned, louder than ever, weaving themselves into my nightmares, promising power, promising knowledge, promising oblivion. Driven by desperation, I sought out Master Kenji, the palace's oldest and wisest scholar. He listened patiently as I recounted my experiences, his brow furrowed in concern. The mirror, he said finally, his voice grave, is a gateway, a conduit to a realm beyond our understanding. The entity you saw, it craves entry into our world. But why me? I whispered, my voice trembling. Why is it targeting me? Master Kenji sighed, his gaze distant. You possess a rare sensitivity to the spirit world, he explained. A gift, or perhaps a curse. The entity senses this sensitivity and seeks to use you as a vessel. What can I do? I pleaded. How can I stop it? Master Kenji looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and resolve. The mirror must be destroyed, he said, but it will not be easy. It is bound to this palace, to the very essence of its history. To destroy it, you must unravel the secrets it holds, the dark truths that have been buried for centuries. He then revealed a chilling piece of the palace's history, a story whispered only in hushed tones. He spoke of a concubine, consumed by jealousy and rage, who had made a pact with a malevolent entity to gain power over her rivals. The pact involved a ritual, performed with a silver mirror, that unleashed a wave of sickness and death within the palace walls. The concubine, along with her victims, were sealed within the abandoned wing, their tormented spirits trapped for eternity. The reflection you saw, Master Kenji said, his voice barely a whisper, was the concubine. She is the key. You must find her remains and perform a purification ritual to break the curse. The task before me seemed insurmountable. To venture back into the abandoned wing, to face the malevolent entity and the tormented spirits trapped within, was a terrifying prospect. But I knew I had no choice. The fate of the shogun, the fate of the palace, perhaps even the fate of the entire nation, rested on my shoulders. The whispers intensified, a chorus of promises and threats echoing in my mind. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the horrors that awaited. The hunt had begun. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 22. The whispers followed me into the Shogun's private gardens, clinging to the rustling silk of my stolen kimono like clinging mist. They no longer sounded like whispers, but like the buzzing of fat, iridescent flies, close to my ears, probing, searching. The garden, once a sanctuary, had become a suffocating labyrinth of shadows and half-seen movements. Even the meticulously pruned bonsai trees seemed to twist and contort in my peripheral vision, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I knew I had to reach the hidden passage. It was my only escape, the one secret I believed the Onibaba, the demonic crone who ruled the shadows of the palace, hadn't discovered. But the garden, previously so familiar, felt alien, reconfigured. The stone lanterns that once marked the path now seemed deliberately misleading, each turn leading me deeper into the oppressive stillness. The buzzing intensified. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the sound seemed to emanate from within my skull, a maddening chorus of chittering voices. Then, a single voice cut through the buzzing, clear as a bell. "Lost, little bird?" I whirled around, my hand flying to the kunai hidden beneath my obi. The Onibaba stood before me, bathed in the pale light of a distorted moon. Her face, a grotesque mask of age and malice, was unsettlingly serene. Her eyes, two black pits, seemed to absorb the moonlight, reflecting nothing back. "You cannot hide from me, child," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across stone. "The palace breathes my secrets. It sees through my eyes." I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my throat was constricted, my tongue heavy. The Onibaba raised a withered hand, and the buzzing intensified, a physical pressure against my eardrums. The garden around me began to blur, the edges of reality fraying like old silk. "You sought power, did you not?" The Onibaba continued, her voice dripping with a sickening sweetness. "You craved the secrets hidden within these walls." She took a step closer, and the air grew colder, thick with the stench of decay. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body refused to obey. I was trapped, not by physical restraints, but by the sheer force of her malevolence. "The palace grants power," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear, "but it demands a price." She reached out and touched my cheek, her touch like ice. I flinched, a primal terror gripping my heart. As her fingers brushed against my skin, I felt a searing pain, a burning coldness that spread through my veins like liquid fire. Images flashed before my eyes, distorted faces, whispering voices, scenes of unimaginable cruelty. The secrets of the palace, raw and visceral, flooded my senses, overwhelming me with their horror. I stumbled back, gasping for air, the buzzing now a deafening roar. The Onibaba chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that echoed through the garden. "You see now, child," she said, her voice laced with triumph. "The palace does not give its secrets lightly. It consumes those who dare to pry." The world around me began to spin. The ground beneath my feet dissolved, and I felt myself falling, tumbling into a bottomless abyss. The buzzing intensified, becoming a single, piercing shriek. Then, darkness. When I awoke, I was lying on the cold stone floor of a cell. The buzzing was gone, replaced by a dull throbbing in my head. My body ached, and my throat was parched. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. The cell was small and damp, the only light filtering through a narrow slit high in the wall. I could see nothing but bare stone and shadows. I called out, but my voice was a raspy whisper. There was no answer. Panic began to claw at me. How long had I been here? What had the Onibaba done to me? I struggled to remember, but my mind was a fog, the memories fragmented and distorted. I recalled the garden, the buzzing, the Onibaba's touch, and the secrets, the terrible, unspeakable secrets of the palace. They were still there, lurking in the shadows of my mind, whispering, clawing, trying to break free. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block them out, but it was no use. They were a part of me now, a poison seeping into my soul. A sound echoed from the corridor outside, the slow, dragging footsteps that I had come to dread, the Onibaba. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and she stepped into the cell, her eyes burning into me with an unholy light. "You understand now, don't you?" she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. "The palace demands obedience. It demands sacrifice." She raised a hand, and I saw a glint of steel in the dim light, a tanto, its blade gleaming with a malevolent sheen. "The Onibaba serves the palace," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, "and the palace hungers." The blade descended. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 23. The whispers followed me. Even as I descended into the hidden passage, the susurrus snaked down the stone steps, slithering around my ankles like spectral vipers. They spoke of blood, of shadows, of the emptiness within the earth. I pressed on, my hand clamped over the small, pulsating orb of the Oni's heart I'd carved from its chest. It throbbed against my palm, a sickly counterpoint to the fear drumming in my own. The passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth beneath the palace. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp stone and something else. Something ancient and unsettling. The flickering light of my lantern cast grotesque shadows on the walls, contorting the already strange carvings into monstrous visages. Faces seemed to leer from the darkness, their hollow eyes following my every move. I had to get out. I had to reach the hidden exit that led to the forest beyond the palace walls. With the Oni's heart, I could perform the ritual, sever the link between the shogun and the malevolent entity possessing him. But the whispers were growing louder, more insistent. They insinuated themselves into my thoughts, whispering doubts, fueling my fear. "You cannot escape, asterisk," they hissed. "This place claims all who enter." I quickened my pace, my sandals slapping against the damp stone. The passage opened into a larger chamber, circular and dimly lit by a single shaft of moonlight filtering down from a crack in the ceiling high above. In the center of the chamber was a stone altar, stained dark with what looked suspiciously like dried blood. The air here was almost suffocating, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. And then I saw them, figures cloaked in shadows, ringed around the altar. They didn't move, didn't speak, but their presence radiated a chilling stillness. They were like statues carved from the very darkness of the chamber, their forms shifting and blurring at the edges of my vision. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The Oni's heart pulsed frantically in my hand, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices echoing around me. "Join us," asterisks they urged. "Become one with the shadows." I shook my head, fighting against the encroaching darkness. I had to focus. I had to reach the exit. Slowly, cautiously, I began to circle the chamber, keeping the altar and the shadowy figures in my peripheral vision. Each step was an agonizing effort, my legs heavy as lead. As I moved, I noticed something disturbing. The carvings on the walls of this chamber were different. They depicted grotesque rituals, sacrifices, and transformations. Humans morphing into monstrous shapes, their limbs twisting, their faces contorting into expressions of agony and ecstasy. One carving in particular caught my eye. It depicted a figure holding a heart, much like the one I now possessed. The figure was placing the heart on the altar, and as it did, its body began to change, to darken. Tendrils of shadow seemed to erupt from the figure, engulfing it, transforming it into one of the cloaked figures surrounding the altar. A wave of icy dread washed over me. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were a chorus, chanting in unison. The heart is the key. The heart is the sacrifice. Join us. Become one with the shadows. I understood now. The Oni's heart wasn't the key to breaking the Shogun's possession. It was the key to joining it. The Oni hadn't been controlling the Shogun. It had been absorbed, assimilated into the darkness that resided within this place, within the palace itself. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The shadowy figures began to move, slowly at first, then faster, their cloaks swirling around them like a vortex of darkness. They were closing in, their unseen eyes fixed on me, on the heart I held. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I had to escape. I turned and ran, blindly, desperately, the chanting of the shadows echoing in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from the altar, from the chamber, from the darkness that was closing in. The passage stretched ahead, seemingly endless. The whispers pursued me, their voices laced with a chilling promise. I cannot escape. The shadows will claim you. The heart will be ours. I stumbled, falling to my knees, the Oni's heart slipping from my grasp. It rolled across the stone floor, coming to rest at the foot of a shadowed alcove. As I reached for it, a hand, pale and skeletal, emerged from the darkness, snatching the heart before I could grasp it. I looked up, my heart pounding in my chest. Standing in the alcove, cloaked in shadow, was a figure I recognized. It was me. But not me. This version of myself was twisted, corrupted, her eyes burning with an unholy light. She held the Oni's heart aloft, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Welcome, sister," she hissed, her voice a distorted echo of my own. "The shadows have claimed you." I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace, part 24 of 25. The Oni's laughter echoed, bouncing off the impossibly high ceilings of the hidden chamber. The air thrummed with a malevolent energy that pressed against my skin, a physical manifestation of the darkness swirling within the room. The Shogun, his eyes gleaming with a feverish light, stood beside the hulking creature, his hand resting possessively on its gnarled arm. He looked different, younger, somehow, yet with a chilling emptiness behind his gaze. "You understand now, Kasumi?" His voice, usually calm and measured, was now edged with a sharp, unnatural timbre. "The true power that lies beneath this palace. The power that will secure my reign for eternity." I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. The Oni shifted its weight, the floor groaning beneath its immense bulk. Its eyes, burning embers in its grotesque face, fixed on me. I felt a prickle of fear, colder and sharper than any blade, crawl down my spine. I had faced death before, many times, but this was different. This was an ancient, primordial terror, something that belonged in whispered legends, not in the flesh. This power, it demands a price. I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the Oni itself were consuming the very oxygen around us. The Shogun's laugh was short and brittle. A small price for such immeasurable power. A single life, a willing sacrifice. My blood ran cold. He wasn't talking about some random courtier, some expendable servant. He was talking about me. "You chose me for this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded, his smile widening, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too long. You possess a unique spirit, Kasumi. Strong, resilient, the perfect vessel. The Oni lumbered forward, its shadow engulfing me. The stench of decay and something else, something ancient and unholy, filled my nostrils. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but my limbs felt heavy, leaden. The Oni's presence was overwhelming, a crushing weight on my very being. The ritual must begin at the next full moon, the Shogun continued, his voice now a low, hypnotic drone. Until then, you will remain here, prepared. 2 guards, their faces masked and their eyes devoid of any emotion, stepped forward and seized my arms. They dragged me towards a darkened alcove at the back of the chamber. Chains, thick and rusted, hung from the wall. The metal felt cold against my skin as they bound me. The days that followed blurred into a nightmarish haze. The chamber was always dark, illuminated only by the flickering light of a single torch. The Oni remained a constant presence, its heavy breathing a rhythmic reminder of my impending doom. The Shogun visited occasionally, his words a twisted mix of promises and threats. He spoke of the power he would wield, the glorious future he would forge, all built upon the foundation of my sacrifice. I tried to meditate, to focus my energy, to find some way to escape, but the Oni's presence disrupted my inner peace, its malevolent energy seeping into my thoughts, poisoning my spirit. Fear, cold and suffocating, became my constant companion. The guards brought me meager meals, barely enough to sustain me. They never spoke, their masked faces blank, their movements robotic. They were more like automatons than men, their humanity stripped away, replaced by a chilling obedience to the Shogun's will. One night, as the full moon cast long, eerie shadows across the chamber, the Shogun returned, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. He was accompanied by a group of robed figures, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. They chanted in a low, guttural tongue, their words weaving a web of dark magic around me. The Oni stirred, its massive form rising to its full height. Its eyes glowed with an infernal light. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was it, my end. The robed figures formed a circle around me, their chanting growing louder, more insistent. The air crackled with unseen energy. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. But instead of pain, I felt emptiness, a vast, hollow void opening up within me. Then, a voice, not my own, whispered in my ear, a voice ancient and powerful, tinged with a sorrow that stretched across millennia. Asterisk, not yet, little one. My eyes snapped open. The chanting stopped. The robed figures looked at each other in confusion. The Oni let out a frustrated roar, its eyes burning with rage. The Shogun's face contorted in a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. The robed figures mumbled apologies, their voices trembling. The Shogun turned to me, his eyes narrowed. You did something," he hissed, his voice laced with suspicion. I shook my head, my mind reeling. I didn't understand what had just happened. But one thing was clear. Something, or someone, had intervened. And in that intervention, I saw a glimmer of hope, a faint flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. The fight was not over, not yet. To be concluded. I was a Kunoichi spy in the Shogun's palace. Part 25 of 25. The Oni's laughter echoed, bouncing off the unseen walls of this place. It wasn't the palace anymore, not really. The familiar tatami mats, the shoji screens, the scent of cherry blossom incense, all were gone, replaced by a suffocating emptiness that pressed in on me like a physical weight. The air itself seemed to hum with a low, malevolent thrum. "Clever girl," the Oni rasped, its voice a guttural growl. It hadn't materialized fully, just the disembodied voice and the suffocating dread. "You found the heart of the palace, or perhaps it found you."